Hello, viewers. Today again, we are honored that Larry Johnson, one of the uh, best geopolitical analysts in the world today, is adorning our show once again, and we're going to kind of discuss all over the world, the political events happening around all over the world, including the geopolitical events in Syria, Middle East, Russia and Ukraine, and then finally the terrorist attacks, which has now taken place just before the Trump's presidency in the US. So, without further ado, welcome to you, Larry Johnson.
Thank you. Yeah, good to know nothing's going on in the world, right? All's calm.
So, Larry, I think I would like to start with Middle East first because this is closer to us. What do you make of the first few weeks of Al Jalani's takeover of Syria? How are the things panning around?
Well, he's clearly not acting in the interest of the people of Syria. He is an outsider, and HTS is comprised largely of outsiders, foreign fighters. So they don't have the connections with the local tribal leaders, the local clans. They don't know the people in the land. So their ability to control, I think, is going to be in question, and they're going to get some pushback. The transformation of Jelani is just shocking, stunning, because he was not some armchair warrior claiming to be a vicarious jihadi. I mean, he was a senior leader within ISIS. And then the reason he split off and they formed al-Nusra, I'm not sure the exact motivations, but it was not a rupture because al-Nusra continued to have cordial relations with what remained of the leadership of ISIS. And then he moves away from al-Nusra and creates Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And, that first appears in the State Department Bureau of Counterterrorism country reports on terrorism in January of 2017. And from January 2017, HTS is, it's listed as one of the top 10 most active groups in the world for carrying out terrorist attacks. And so we go from that to all of a sudden, the guy's dressed up in a suit, got a shaved beard, talking, there's a show, we had a show here in the United States that I'm sure you're not familiar with. It was called Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. And what this was, it had four homosexual men who were, one was a fabulous dresser and one was a fabulous chef. And, and they'd go in and find some heterosexual guy who was a complete slob, couldn't cook, couldn't dress, couldn't clean his house, and they'd clean him up. And by the end, the guy was, very well dressed and talking. That's Jelani. Jelani's had this homosexual makeover, is the only way I can describe it. And it has exposed the fact that Western intelligence, despite claiming that we're fighting a war on terrorism against Islamic extremism, is in fact having relations with Islamic extremists and using them to accomplish U.S. and British goals. So what you have going on right now in Syria is Jelani pretending to be in control, but they don't even have, HTS is not a large enough entity to control the territory. Turkey's trying to figure out what it's going to do. It's, its war with the Kurds is heating up today in the last 24 hours. So you've got American-backed Kurdish forces fighting Turkish-backed Islamic forces. Yeah, that's going to end well. Then to the south, you got Israel controlling, around the Golan Heights and some key waterways. But the rest of Syria is really not under anybody's control. So we've got a recipe for chaos here.
Larry, so do you see any elements of Syrian native resistance, basically kind of putting up a show of resistance against this HTS, these mostly militants based on by foreign elements? Do you see any resistance on the ground, or do you think the people are right now in a kind of just gauging the situation?
No, there is resistance. It just depends on the area of the country. So there's, Syria is not a monolith, but in terms of ethnic makeup, you've got the Druze more towards the southwest. You've got pockets where the Alawites are strong, pockets where Christians are strong, pockets where the Shia are strong. But 70% of the country is still Sunni Muslim. But even within those Sunnis, they're not one solid block. They tend to have more tribal loyalty. So it's a mess. Syria is not an entity right now. It's got a figurehead. Jelani's a figurehead. That's all he is. He doesn't command an army. He's a useful idiot for the West.
Larry, one thing that amazes me, when I look at the 100 years history of Syria, because Syria was made up in 1928, it was carved up out of the Ottoman Empire. And now kind of France, all these Western powers have handed over Syria back to the new Ottoman Empire, which is Erdogan. It just amazes me.
Yeah, this this fulfills Erdogan's dream. He wanted to sort of recapture that glory. But this is like this is something akin to you getting all of a sudden, let's say your brother or your cousin dies, and he's got 5 kids, and they're not good kids. They're sort of out of control. All of a sudden now he dies, they come to live with you. All of a sudden, you've got 5 additional mouths to feed. They're doing things that you can't necessarily control. It creates problems for you. That's what has happened to Turkey with this. Yeah, it occupies some of the territory. And but recall when Assad, in the immediate hours when Assad disappeared, everybody said, "Oh boy, this is a major defeat for Russia. This is a major defeat for Iran. Boy, Iran and Russia, they got their rear ends kicked." And so what's happened? Both Turkey and Jelani are going to the Russians. "Hey, please stay. Don't go away. Yeah, here, stay." And the Russians are going, "I don't know. We'll see." Iran, again, it is the thing I think a lot of folks don't appreciate is that when Iran had its official presence in Syria and was working with Assad's government and working with Assad's intelligence and military, the Israelis, through their intelligence service, had penetrated the Syrian intelligence service and the Syrian military. So therefore, Israel practically knew everything that Iran was going to be doing. It had excellent intelligence on that front. Now, Iran doesn't go through that official Syrian channels. Iran, I guarantee you, still has relations and networks in Syria that are not penetrated by the Israelis. So, in a sense, Israel has ended up blinding itself somewhat to what Iran's real capabilities are with respect to resupplying Hezbollah. So this is, the dream, the Ottoman dream of recapturing Jerusalem and restoring the Ottoman Empire, because again, they had control of it for 600 years almost, I think it's overreaching by Erdogan.
That is just last question about Middle East before we move on to other topics. this conduit that we last talked about, the Syrian conduit from Iran to resistance movement in Lebanon. Do you think that they are feeling the heat of this regime change in Syria? I mean, I'm talking about the Lebanese resistance specifically. Or do you think that this Hezbollah is standing tall still?
No, well, I think Hezbollah is not the sign of a terrorist, let's say a terrorist group, an armed group, a resistance group that's insecure is when they're always out talking about what they're doing. Hezbollah is not like that. So Hezbollah is remaining quiet, and I am sure they are rebuilding networks, rebuilding supply lines, and they're making plans to, renew the fight with Israel. Israel has broken the ceasefire repeatedly, and all attention right now is focused on Lebanon and the election of a president. The favorite reportedly is this General Aoun, who, as I understand, is a Maronite Christian, but he appears to have sort of the blessing of Hezbollah as well as the blessing of the United States. So we'll see how that turns out. Lebanon is, as a government, in terms of being able to control Hezbollah, very, very weak. It is not in that position at all. What the West wants is to get a strong leader, which has a strong military that can take on Hezbollah. But I don't see that as likely. And I think that this war is going to reignite. Appears a lot are waiting to see what for the inauguration of Donald Trump. What happens then? Because Trump is sending, he's sending mixed signals. That's sort of consistent with what he's done all along. You've seen just in the last 24 hours at his press conference in Mar-a-Lago yesterday, he said that if Hamas doesn't release the hostages by the time he's sworn in, there'll be hell to pay. Well, I don't see how much more hellish it could get for the civilians in Gaza and the Palestinian people. But then on his Truth Social platform, he retweeted an article, commentary by Professor Jeffrey Sachs, in which he referred to Netanyahu as a despicable son of a bitch or something. It's just some, pretty harsh language. So the fact that Trump's retweeting that is seen as, hey, he doesn't support Netanyahu. So, we don't really know what's going on. But within this, Lebanon, it's a pawn. It's a piece in a power game, and unfortunately, it doesn't have a lot of power. It's just it's a tool or an instrument in the hands of some pretty bad people.